Hey guys, Spud here, and welcome to Cairo West Airbase on the upcoming DCS Sinai Map. Today we're going to be talking about a very easy and quick adjustment you can make to how you're utilizing the rudder pedals in your home cockpit to make flying the DCS AH-64D Apache as easy as possible. I've had 3 students right in a row here who have been trying to learn the Apache, but just can't get the grasp of how to actually fly the aircraft around the map. They made this very quick and easy adjustment after we talked about it, and they're able to grasp flying the helicopter right away, and we could then move on to talking and learning about the various systems of the helicopter. So let's go ahead and get started. So I know there's a lot of you guys out there who are very frustrated with flying the Apache, and Casmo put out a great video a couple days ago addressing some of the issues that people find frustration with when it comes to the trimming system of the helicopter. But I've found with my students there is another very simple and easy fix that we can do to alleviate a ton of frustration. It's very, very simple. All we have to do is take our feet on the rudder pedals of our home cockpit and slide them down so that way our heels are planted firmly on the floor, and we want to have the balls of our feet on the bottom part of the rudder pedal with our toes somewhere near the middle. Now, this is going to allow us to make the very minute adjustments to the anti-torque pedals that is required to fly a hypercritical aircraft like the Apache, or even some of the warbirds that we have in DCS. Now, there's a big misconception out there in the wider flight sim community, not just the DCS World community, about how to properly use your rudder pedals. It kind of is twofold. It comes from the manufacturer's side as well as it comes from the end user side. For the end user side, it's not something that you would come across in any of the module manuals, whether that's in DCS or Microsoft Flight Simulator, and you wouldn't know about it unless you had some kind of real-world flight training, or you talk to somebody, or a friend or an acquaintance or somebody in your squadron that you fly with who utilizes the proper technique and they pass it on to you. From the manufacturer's side, the manufacturers of the rudder pedals for our home cockpits actually encourage you to use the pedals in the incorrect fashion. This is especially true with the lower end pedals, like the Thrustmaster TFRP pedals or the Cytec pedals that have little heel backstops that kind of force you to put your entire foot up onto the pedal. So the big reason that my students were so frustrated is they had their whole foot up on the anti-torque pedals here in the Apache, and so they were unable to make those very minute adjustments because they were trying to move their rudder pedals and fight the springs in their rudder pedals with their entire leg and all of the large muscles that run throughout our entire leg, from our calf to our thighs up into our hips, which means that those muscle movements and adjustments are going to be very big, imprecise, and jerky. And then once they were able to get up into the air, they were having to strain against those springs the entire flight. And so one of my students was getting muscle cramps and fatigue because the Apache requires constant rudder inputs to keep the aircraft flying straight, and so you don't crash and die. And so that was just making him incredibly frustrated. And honestly, this adjustment saved my students from giving up on the Apache and giving up on DCS World entirely. They were that frustrated. But once they made this very small change of simply putting their heels on the floor, it was like throwing a switch. They could now take off without entering an uncontrolled spin and auguring in. They could fly around for hours, no problem. They were able to fly the Apache just so much easier, allowing them to start digging into the very complex systems of this helicopter. So let's go ahead and take off here, and we'll continue talking about this issue. So we'll take the parking brake off, and we'll start to pull up on our collective, getting lighter and lighter on our wheels here. We'll do a little fly around of Cairo West Airbase, and we're starting to get a little bit of roll to the right, so we'll roll back to the left with our stick, hit the trimmer, trim everything out, Little bit of left rudder required, a little bit more left stick, hit the trimmer, and I'm making just so small adjustments with the rudder pedals. It makes having my heels on the ground absolutely key, because I can make that very small adjustment by pushing on the pedal with the balls of my feet and then locking that control input in with my heels on the hard wood on the bottom of my home cockpit here. I highly recommend that you don't fly barefoot when using your rudder pedals in the proper technique. You want to have just a very thin soled shoe like a Converse or a Vans, where you can feel the rudder pedal very easily underneath your feet, but you still have that nice rubberized sole to keep you from sliding across the floor of your home cockpit. So you can really lock in those tiny control movements. So you can see I'm making just super tiny corrections with my anti-torque pedals, and I'm able to then lock in those corrections very easily, allowing me to then have time to hit my trimmer, trim out the helicopter, and we're good to go. Kind of not my best attempt at hovering here, because I'm trying to talk to you guys at the same time, but I hope the picture is coming across. Now, you might be wondering, well, Spud, if I have my heels on the floor, how can I reach up and get my toe brakes? Well, that's a very good point. And when you're taught to fly in real life, you're taught to have your entire foot up on the rudder pedals during taxi operations, so that way you can reach up and get your toe brakes. But then, once you transition into actual flight, or say you push up the power and you start heading down the runway, or you pull up on the collective on your helicopter, that's when you slide your feet down to put your heels down on the floor. In fact, you'll see in most aircraft in real life, this little panel right here usually has a lot of paint smudged off of it from those pilots constantly digging their heels into that panel and then sliding their heels across the floor. So let's get away from these power or these light standards here. It's kind of freaking me out a little bit. Like I said, guys, not my best attempt at hovering, because I'm trying to explain the concepts to you guys at the same time, but I'm doing my best here, so hopefully it's coming across. So again, with my students having their entire foot up on their anti-torque pedals, they were making just such jerky and such imprecise adjustments to the tail rotor of their helicopter that I was just like, what is going on here? Something is just not right. So I had them open up their controls indicator, and I was watching their movements on the pedals, and I was like, what is going on? And then it finally dawned on me, oh, hey, go ahead and slide your feet down so that way you can lock your heels on the ground. And once they did that, like I said earlier, guys, it was a night and day difference. It was unbelievable how easy it was for them to then start flying the helicopter. Because two of the students could more or less fly around okay, but it was a giant pain in the ass, whereas the other one just couldn't take off at all. But as soon as they made this adjustment, boom, they were flying around like a pro, no problem. So if you have some of those lower end rudder pedals, like the Thrustmaster TFR pedals or the SATEC rudder pedals, I'm not quite sure what the model name is. I know that the TFRP rudder pedals, you can undo two screws and pull that little heel cup off of the rudder pedals to allow you to then get the balls of your feet down on the very bottom of the pedal. But that will help you out, but it's best to go ahead and go for more high-end pedals if you have that in your budget. When it comes to the SATEC pedals, I don't believe there's a way to actually modify them in such a way to get rid of those little heel cups. But I know that back in the day when I was first starting in DCS World, I was just kind of bearing through it and going through and just kind of having the balls of my feet up on those little lips. It wasn't a great solution, but it was a lot better than having my whole foot up on the pedal the entire time. So just food for thought, guys. It'll make a big difference for you, and it'll alleviate a ton of frustration. So between this technique and then watching Casmo's video about how to properly trim out your Apache, I think will alleviate a lot of frustration for you guys. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. And hopefully this is a good little preview also of Cairo West Airbase here on the DCS Sinai map. Pretty cool. So why don't we just kind of keep on flying around and do a little lap around the airfield here. One of the other advantages of having your heels on the floor is beyond being able to lock in those very minute adjustments, you'll also be able to make much smaller adjustments because you have your heels indexed onto the floor. You can feel how far your heel is sliding across the floor, and so you can kind of judge how small of an increment of movement on the rudder pedals you're making. Whereas before, if you had no reference point like the ground and your whole foot is up on the pedal, you can't really tell how far you're moving your pedal. I know that I'm using the words anti-torque pedals and rudder pedals interchangeably, and that's more or less because the fact that the manufacturers of these pedals market them as rudder pedals, not as anti-torque pedals. So we can see Cairo West is a very cool airbase here on the DCS Sinai map. It's very detailed, populated with a whole bunch of extra scenes and things. It's going to make a fantastic target for you guys who are planning to fly on the Israeli side and bomb the Egyptian side. And it's also going to be a great focal point for those of you guys who are trying to reenact some of the Egyptian and Libyan conflicts as well. I believe, hopefully I'm correct here, if I recall correctly, that Cairo West Airbase is the home of the last Egyptian F-4 squadrons, as well as the Egyptian MiG-29 and MiG-35 squadrons as well. So definitely a very important base for the Egyptian Air Force, both back in the 1970s and the 1960s during the conflicts with Israel, as well as to today. As I'm sure you guys have seen in the news, Egypt and Sudan are becoming quite a geopolitical hotspot, and so that's kind of timely for a more modern conflict setting on the DCS Sinai map. Very cool stuff, and I hope you guys are enjoying this little preview, and I hope you are taking a look up on our controls indicator there so you can see just how minute these changes are that I'm making on my pedals in my home cockpit to influence, of course, the flight of our Apache here. Little SA2 site down there with an elevated radar and a nice centralized bunker to protect the personnel down there. If you're interested in the SAM sites on the DCS Sinai map, make sure you check out my DCS Sinai SAM sites deep dive video that I have pinned in the comments section down below. Alright, and we'll go ahead and start to come in for a landing. Right back where we started. Making all of these tiny changes on the rudder pedals. Just pushing on the bottom of the pedal with the balls of my feet, and then locking that position in with the rubberized sole of my shoes on the floor of my home cockpit, just like a real pilot would with his heel on the floor of our Apache. I know that flying this helicopter is hard, but Truly, guys, this little technique change that I had my students make made such a night and day difference that they went from just being so ridiculously frustrated with it and ready to throw their copy of DCS World into the trash to then being able to have a great time and start learning the intricacies of their Apache. It was a pretty awesome change, that's for sure. Hopefully I don't lose it here at the end. Just start edging over. Those light stands are not our friend, that's for sure. I'm also pretty heavy, which doesn't help. One of the things also that my students typically have a hard time with in the Apache is they tend to panic close to the ground, and it's definitely something that I have struggled with in the past as well. And we just want to fly the Apache just like we do normally, 7 feet from the ground, just like we would a couple hundred feet off the ground. You know, there's no big difference. And something to also be aware of, guys, is every time we move our collective, we're also going to have a corresponding change on our anti-torque pedals due to the changing amount of torque from the main rotor. And that is also going to require these tiny, tiny, tiny movements on our anti-torque pedals. That is just made so much easier by this technique, and you won't find yourself just kind of like flapping around in the breeze with your nose going left, right, left, right, left, right all the time, like I see in a lot of people's Apache videos and a lot of my wingmen in my missions when I fly the Apache. Just kind of have a lot of undulations left and right. Oh, like I got into right there. So there we go. So we just got to dampen that out. Not the best landing in the world, but it'll work, guys. I really hope I got this technique across to you guys. It's something that will help you guys out just so much. And please leave a like and a subscribe. And I hope you guys enjoyed this little preview of Cairo West Airbase. A great target and a great place to take off from.